Hello and welcome to another podcast with your host, Miriam Khan at Raise Your Vibes. I'm going to do a trigger warning for this particular podcast because there may be individuals listening to this that can certainly and definitely relate to a lot of the topic areas I'm going to cover. However, it may trigger past trauma, it may trigger aspects of us that still need to heal, or it may trigger parts of us that we don't want to remember. Each of us will be in, obviously, understandably, different aspects of our life. So this whole focus of this particular podcast, is looking at generational trauma and generational taboo subjects or curses. Or, we all come from lots and lots of different cultures and traditions and religion and the way that customary things are perhaps done in our society. So, I'm coming from it from various different angles. There's not just one particular angle, but I am going to provide, obviously, very in-depth details where I can about certain cases or certain individuals where this has certainly had a huge impact. So, we all hopefully know our ancestors. We hopefully know our hereditary. We know where we've come from. We know who our line of ancestors are. Sometimes that's not always possible because we may be adopted, we may be fostered, perhaps we've lost contact. These things do happen in the world and society that we live in. Sometimes those relatives are kept away from us as well for various reasons, or we step away from them. So sometimes there are gaps in that aspect as well. But in regards to our family trees and our family lines, there's quite a lot of cultural sort of aspects that feed into us. And even though we're in 2024, quite a lot of that has been passed down from generations into our families. You're often told we don't do this particular thing because in our family we do it this particular way. This is not how we do it. This is how we do it. And sometimes we're often reminded about certain individuals that perhaps were at a certain plateau or had excelled themselves, or they had done particular things that were quite pivotal in society or within the community or in our world. There might be some people that have done a huge landmark change, and understandably it's had like a ripple effect to other people that are within our community and within our timeline and within our family. Obviously, all of us look at that in very, very different ways. And sometimes what we don't realize is there's topics and there's issues and there's aspects of our family lives, and we don't actually talk about them. We bury it. We bury it under the carpet, so to say. We don't discuss it. We know it's there. There's a rumbling. It's evident, but we don't say it. Also, perhaps we don't discuss it. We also pretend or imagine it never happened, which is quite painful and quite hurtful to the individual who's had that injustice or trauma or whatever trigger point they've had. Is very, very painful for them because obviously, healing and coming out the other side is going to require some support and some help. And, if we're talking about generations of family ancestors, say in the 1920s or 1800s, there wasn't really such a thing as going to a shrink. They may have existed, but the therapies were obviously outdated and outmoded to what we have now. Now we have a plethora of all these different types of therapy that's available. But obviously it costs money and it costs, time to be in the waiting system to receive such help, And also there's issues where not everybody believes us when we voice our trauma. But in family ancestral lines, there may have clearly been that individual or individuals, who have unfortunately gone through different types of scenarios. So culturally and traditionally, if we think of, not just Caucasian families, but we're talking ethnic minority families, different rules, different places, different continents, where there's this tradition that if something bad has happened, maybe someone's received an injury, maybe somebody has, been fit and healthy one particular day, and the next day they are not walking and they're not able to do the things before. Perhaps medically there is something that they don't understand, the cause of that situation. Maybe it becomes apparent much, much later on. However, family members or cultural members or community members are very, very quick to judge and say, For example, somebody's giving you the bad eye, someone's giving you the evil eye, somebody's got a hex on you, someone's done a voodoo doll on you, somebody obviously doesn't want you to excel, and you should have been more careful about boasting about something. There's so many different ways of this being apparent in our society, and you don't necessarily have to be Caucasian or from an ethnic minority family or traditions to understand this. I'm sure it's applicable in many cultures. However, nowadays not everybody follows that, not everybody understands that, or not everybody relates to that, because we're now being more scientific, I guess, in regards to what we're doing. But for those individuals where it has that huge impact, they have had that, unfortunate situation where perhaps they have lost the ability to walk. Perhaps they have got this rare disease that, all their life they've been fine. They get to about age 35, 36, boom, something happens and they discover they've got this rare genetic, situation happening to them. And apparently it runs in the family, it runs in the genes. You can have all sorts of things happen like that. In other scenarios, you've got people who, unfortunately have been victims of trauma through huge cases of sexual abuse. And it can be where it's passed down family tree lines. So, for example, I'm going to do the stereotypical one, but I'm going to come back to this in a second. So, stereotypically, you might have the young girl who was sexually abused or physically abused when she was younger. We now know that obviously abuse is a huge category. It includes financial abuse, mental abuse, there's so many different categories out there. There's not just one, and sadly, if you're with a narcissistic person or someone who's slightly psychotic or just someone who's just not a very nice person, this can impact you hugely, okay? That trauma between that particular individual, say that was your great-granddaughter, she's never spoken about it, wasn't able to speak about it, because obviously there's consequences, maybe culturally, there's consequences for her in that community, outside that community. There's also the physical aspect or the mental aspect of shame. Way back in lots of cultures, some people were killed drastically, even though they're innocent, and some were shunned. There's so many different ways of how society have dealt with it, not necessarily the right way. Trauma, however, doesn't also mean it's always through the female. Like this particular female has kept that a secret, passed it down, and then her own daughter goes through something similar, also isn't able to speak. And then it continues to the next daughter and granddaughter and so on, till somebody in that family eventually is like, no, I'm not doing this no more. I'm not staying silent about this no more. It's not acceptable for this to be classed as normal, inverted commas. And they want to break free from that particular mode of abuse. And quite rightly so, because it's become normal, inverted commas. And it's not normal to hurt and abuse and sexually torment somebody. It's not at all. And abuse can happen with males as well. And this is a topic that we don't often talk about, but it does happen. It does occur. And sadly, quite a lot of men stay very, very silent about it. They struggle big time to voice it. They struggle to get help. They struggle just to say this has happened to them. And, it eats away, whichever the individual is, it eats away at them. That thorn and that trauma is there. It's permanently there. And quite clearly, when we've passed it down from one generation to another generation to another generation, that lineage is not helping the family to remove themselves of that past. It's a cycle that hasn't broken. It's a cycle that is continuing to be repeated, rightly or wrongly. And you can have your own different views on that. Like I said, many people from different cultures will have their own aspect on this, because culturally there's things that perhaps we accept. We don't, when I say accept, I mean, it's happened. The family think, okay, it's best not to say anything in the community because I still want my son or daughter to be able to get married and have a normal life, inverted commas. Okay. Nowadays, like I said, in 2024 onwards, there's a lot more psychotherapy. There's a lot more CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a lot more things out there to support individuals to get help and to receive help. And more importantly, to be heard. It's very, very difficult to say to someone, I have been sexually abused, or I have been verbally abused, or financially abused, or whatever the scenario is, and for people not to believe you or to accept the fact that you have struggled to voice this, and they are not willing to open up and receive that support. And I appreciate that this is a very controversial and very raw topic to talk about, but it's a very, very important one because it's happening on a larger scale. We're witnessing in 2024 more and more people sadly being hurt and sadly being molested and abused and betrayed in various shapes and forms. And a lot of us in society are staying quiet about it. And this is what I mean about the fact that it comes down to different generations. You know, we pass it down. We pass down that pain. We pass down that trauma of unspokenness because such incidents were so difficult for us to express. But we felt them. We can see them. We can witness them. It doesn't take a lot to look at an older individual in our family timeline, a great-grandparent, a grandparent if we're lucky to have them. And sometimes you can see the pain. You can see the wisdom in their eyes, but you can also sense the pain that they've buried. And that won't be true for everybody. You know, some people who have had beautiful lives, amazing lives, they won't have had things happen to them, hopefully, touch wood. But there's quite a lot of people that are, you know, and it's those individuals that I'm targeting this podcast to, because clearly we need to discuss this topic so that we feel it's okay to go and seek help. Now, in all these different scenarios, you'll have different people coming into different timelines, different generations. It doesn't necessarily have to be 2024, but you'll have someone, and you'll know what I mean by this. You'll have someone that's within your family tree that is, I guess, regarded as the cuckoo one, the one that perhaps is cursed, but cursed in inverted commas, the one that apparently is the black sheep of the family, the one that's outspoken. Perhaps everybody believes that this person is cuckoo and they need to be locked up. But actually, if you actually listen to this individual, you'll discover they're telling you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the people around them have done everything they can to hush them up. Okay? Hush them up because obviously they don't want the family secrets to be out. They don't want the family trauma and injustice or pain to be known to others, because we still unfortunately have that stigma where we are so worried about what other people will think rather than healing within and healing without. We're more concerned about what will Joe Blogs 10 doors down the street think that my daughter or son has happened to them. The reality is that we shouldn't have to worry about that concept. We should be more concerned about the welfare of our child, the welfare of that person in our care. It could be a brother, sister, aunt, whatever, but we're not. Our priorities are obviously a little bit muddled up there. And for generations, again, we've been programmed to believe that that's acceptable when in fact it's not. And these things are not easy to move forward from. It's not easy to accept that this is not normal, inverted commas, that I need to do something about it. Now, you know, a lot of times that individual who, you know, whether it's female or male, that ends up having this huge responsibility on their shoulders will have a huge fight on their hands. And the fight is something that, you know, is mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally draining. And I mean draining. There's going to be times when you're just absolutely exhausted. It feels like you've been in constant battles, not just with yourself, but the people around you. And sadly, in a lot of cases where the individual is the black sheep of the family, they have had to walk away. They've had to walk away from that community. They've had to walk away from that generational trauma. They've had to walk away and start a new path. And believe me when I say that is not easy. It's not easy at all. And there's a lot of us out there that can relate to that. So being in that predicament, being in that situation is not for the light-hearted. Obviously, you're going to face various challenges throughout that situation. You're going to have family members attacking you left, right, centre. Not just even the people that were meant to be close to you. in that community, but the family members that you thought loved you unconditionally, you suddenly realize that you are the outsider. You are the black sheep, as I've quoted. You know, you're the individual that's going to take this on board and hopefully face the challenges and face this head on. But that comes with great responsibility, a huge responsibility. And like I said, it's not for the weak-hearted. You will find that you will have broken situations with friends many, many times. You'll find that your friendship circles keep changing because the people that you slowly allow yourself to be close to or allow yourself to be near to let you down. And you have to restart again. Sometimes you end up just being on your own. You realize that actually I can't rely on anyone else. I'm going to have to rely on me. You know, we go through situations also of neediness and wanting people to accept us and love us and care for us, when really that has to come from within. But that's another side of this. That's another aspect of this. And it's not an easy, like I said, situation to be in. You will also face quite a lot of trauma and quite a lot of name shaming and quite a lot of insults after insults after insults coming from your actual family. The people that are meant to love you unconditionally. You know, they're the ones that throw the first rocks at you. And they aim well. Their target is well and truly not going to miss. And the sad thing is, they know the truth. They know you have personally stood in your truth. You've stood in your truth. You've said, this is the situation with our generations. This is the situation with my ancestors. And I'm here to say to you that we need to open up about this and we need to heal from it once and for all, rather than it continue to linger. But those family members, you'll see very quickly, will turn their back on you because they don't want you to expose them. They don't want you to express what's happened. And sadly, they are part of the problem as well. They're not there to heal it. They're not there to address it. They're not there to accept it. It's going to be on your shoulders. And like I said, this is not for the faint-hearted. This is a very, very, very difficult journey. And it can take many, many years, and I mean many years, where you are just in complete isolation from family members. You know, some people have been out of it for over 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, where they've just refused to bow down and, you know, be part of that pattern of behavior again. Because in order to step away and in order to heal and in order to work on oneself, i.e., I'm working on me, I'm healing within me, I'm healing myself, and I'm looking at the broken parts of myself. I've mentioned this in other podcasts before, but the more you work on that and the more you break those patterns of behavior, which, believe me, I've struggled with big time. It's not easy, you know, to break free from certain things that have become normal or part of your routine. You end up, you know, very, very isolated, and you end up knowing and understanding yourself better than anyone else. And you understand some of the things that your elders had gone through. When we meditate, we can sort of transfer back and have a situation or a feeling about their feelings. You know, some people have done past, you know, trauma hypnotherapy. They've gone back. There's all sorts of scenarios out there where people have tried to look back at that generational trauma to heal. And like I said, if you're that person who's the selected one, you will be facing this repeatedly. There'll be repeated cycles over the years where you have to keep breaking it. You have to keep looking at yourself and you have to keep breaking those patterns of maybe not caring about yourself fully, your self-esteem, maybe about your confidence. Maybe you're someone who keeps giving too much of your energy away and people keep taking, you know, and it's very hard to find that balance within, because you've been programmed because of this situation to react in a different way. There's not been anyone really there to guide you. You've had to sort of do it yourself. One of the benefits, though, is that you learn how to put barriers in place. You learn the hard way, put it that way, and you become wiser because of it. You know, you're here to break all these generations of trauma. Like I said, for some people believe it's a curse. Some people believe it's the trauma and the abuse and the mental cycle. And other people think that this is, you know, this is was destiny. It was pre-planned. Whatever you believe, the point is that you are trying to break free from it and you're trying to move forward from it. And you're trying to not escape, You're trying to deal with it head on, and you're trying to take accountability. Now, sometimes that accountability isn't even yours in the first place. It's not. That accountability might have come with great grandparents who decided to stay silent over certain scenarios for whatever reason. Your accountability is that you're not going to do that. But you might express it in the right place, in the right time, in the right zone, with the right people that you trust. Someone that's not going to ridicule you, someone that's not going to, be infatuated with bringing you down. Someone, in fact, that believes in healing, someone that's has empathy, someone that has solitude and understands that you require comfort, because expressing this generational trauma or curse or pain is not an easy thing to be able to express in the first place. So obviously your circles of friends have to be wide enough and big enough and good enough to be able to deal with some of the very challenging issues you're going to bring up to them, And obviously it requires an educated person. Doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's gone to school or college, but someone that has a good sense of right and wrong morally and is able to offer good advice morally. Okay, and that in our world right now, again, is very, very hard because we've got a lot of people that are corrupt and a lot of their views are warped in regards to what's right and what's wrong, And it's only when we face those situations, as I keep saying, being like the black sheep of the family and dealing with those situations head on, you will face a lot of loneliness in your life. And you'll face times when you're not happy being by yourself. You're not happy being in a room that's so silent, you can hear everything. And it brings out all your fears, it brings out all your weaknesses. But you have to remember why you're there. You have to remember what your job is, what your purpose is. And you have to remember to start with loving yourself first. And for many of us, that's such a difficult journey. It's so hard to love self. And I've said before that this is the bold, the beautiful, the ugly. And it's also looking at us from a different perspective and saying, yeah, I love myself. We all know that's a very, very, very difficult journey to be on. And when you're dealing with generational trauma, perhaps where there's been a stigma where we don't celebrate our success, we don't celebrate love, we don't celebrate joy. Perhaps most of us are celebrating misery all the time. It's very, very difficult to get out of that mindset and be in a different type of mindset. And this is where you come in. You're the person who's being put in that position where you're here to break that. You're here to break those cycles. You're here to break that past record. You're here to start anew. And like I said, that can have huge challenges. Being homeless might be one of the things you face. Being without family, being without friends. You love them. No matter what's happened, you might love them, but you just can't be with them. You're having to put barriers in place, not just for friends, but for work, for yourself. And these barriers have to keep changing. These routines have to keep changing. These scenarios have to keep changing. And you have to keep working on that, because each particular episode, each relationship, no matter what it is, and when I say relationship, I mean friendship in that as well, they will keep testing you until you learn, and until you learn the hard way. Your path also in this timeline could be that you're meant to be the one that goes to, further study. Maybe you're the one that has to be the one that goes and learns about yourself, learns about your family trees, learns about those behavior, whether you're studying psychology, sociology, whatever. You are focusing in on your actions and your family's actions, and you're trying to come to a different understanding of it from, like a bird's eye view. Not necessarily a close-up one where you've got some bias towards what's occurred. Instead, you're standing back and you're reflecting, because that's the best way to learn when you're from that bird's eye view. When we are in that position, of the person who's going to hopefully break these curses and break the traditions and break the bonds, we know that we have to keep working and moving forward. And each time we're going to keep coming across different soul tribes, different partners, different friendships that mirror us and mirror things we need to still keep healing on. And one of the hardest things is finding your voice. and expressing what happened and expressing who you are. Sometimes you might not necessarily share it with the rest of the world. You might just journal it. You might just keep it with a close friend. All of us will deal with it in a different way. Some of us do podcasts. Some of us do books. We do speeches. We do all sorts of things, working with NHS or medical teams, or working with victims of abuse to help them through it, to come out the other side. But whatever it is you decide to do, you do what's right for you. You do what's right to help you, to help your ancestral line, and to help many, many others, because you don't realize what you're doing has a huge ripple effect. And obviously, it's going to have positive consequences. At the time, it might not seem like that, because the pain and the torment and the trajectory of your generations of family that's on your shoulders, it's a huge, huge, huge burden to carry. And at times we do look at it like that, like we look at it as if it's a burden, but we forget that actually this is a revelation. And once this revelation is revealed, then it's no longer a burden anymore. And it helps ancestrally, even though those people have sadly passed away. It depends if you believe in spirit or not, but you have worked on freeing up that past trauma, that past pain in your spiritual realm. And don't think for 1 second that, you're on your own. No matter what your belief is, what your faith is, spiritually there is like a, knock-on effect with what the things you're doing. It does help your future generations. And you're the one that has to do that. You're the one who has to break free. You're the one who has to carry this. But also then eventually the carrying of that becomes less of a burden and more of a trophy at the end. And a trophy that is not a physical trophy, but a trophy in the sense that you've allowed yourself to stand out from the crowd. You've allowed yourself to be a pivotal point of society. And you've stood in your grace, and you've stood in your authenticity. You've stood for what you stand for, your principles, and you're not budging on that. Think about how many people refuse to even just look at themselves in the mirror. They keep pretending they're dealing, excuse me, they keep pretending that they're dealing with this trauma and breaking the patterns, but they're not. But you are. And we have to keep saying to ourselves, this will all be worth it in the end. And like I said, sometimes we don't see that for many, many years to come. It could be 10 years later, it could be 15 years later, it could be 20 years later. But the main thing is that you, as that person who's obviously got this responsibility on your shoulders, keeps going. And you keep striving forward, and you keep helping many, many other people to be free. And, it's not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not something you should take with a pinch of salt. However, you will be in your family's history for being the one that's stubborn and strong and motivated enough to come out the other side. And how many of them would have that strength to do that? Not many. And there are rewards. There are things that come out of this that are so worth it. However, we don't look at that at the time. We're too busy breaking through and doing the healing and focusing on self and focusing on breaking free from patterns which, have been long in our family history. So it's not always clear or easy to see that or do that. And hopefully when you have been the one that's carried all this weight of the burdens and the trauma and the cultural repression, you're the one that can now voice it. You're the one that has that leap of faith. And yes, you don't have that Superman or Superwoman cape or Batman costume, but believe me, you've earned it. You've gone through much, much more. And you are your own superhero, whether you believe it or not, or whether you see it or not. But you are. And you should be, even though you're through your toughest times, you should be grateful for these journeys, although we don't see it at the time. Because somewhere along the line, there will be a niece, a nephew, an uncle or aunt who will reflect back and thank you for the sacrifices you've made. Because you have helped them when they couldn't help themselves. So thank you for listening to this. I know it's been a a very interesting topic and one that's sensitive too. But I hope and pray that whoever's out there dealing with a similar situation to this can move forward and get help and get support and understand that everything's going to be okay. Lots of love, lots of blessings, wherever you are on your healing journey. All the best. This has been Miriam Khan at Raise Your Vibes.